All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for another Discover Wildlife evening. We're just waiting for a few more people to come in. I can see the numbers just picking up, so we'll just wait for that to plateau off, and then we'll get stuck in. It's good, they're still going up. Just cleared 100, right, that seems to have just stopped. Okie dokie. Right. Yes, once again, thank you very much for joining us this evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Dan Free, and I'm the General Manager here at Wildlife Worldwide and the Travelling Naturalist. And this evening, I have the pleasure to be hosting the wonderful Helen Bryon, who will be talking to us tonight about South Africa, and specifically our Wildlife of Land and Sea trip that we've just introduced. Now, Helen, as many of you will know already, is a wonderful travel consultant, but she's also an exceptional tour leader. She's been leading a lot of trips for us in recent years, whale watching trips, and also trips to the African bush as well, back to her home. So when we launched this trip, she was the obvious candidate to lead it, and I'm sure we're in for a treat tonight as we hear about the whales and marine life of the Western Cape, and then also the Greater Kruger. It's a fabulous trip, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this one. As ever, there will be the opportunity to ask questions either through the chat facility or in the Q&A forum. And I'll either try and answer those questions as we're going along, or if I don't know, I'll put them to Helen at the end of the evening. So we expect the talk to take around 40 minutes, 45 minutes, with a further 15 minutes for questions. And as ever, there will be the opportunity to request any travel plans that may be of interest at the end of the evening. So we will specifically be talking about this trip for the bulk of tonight, but there are a few other trips which Helen leads and which we offer to South Africa, which are also available. So they will all be presented at the end. But without too much further ado, I will hand over to Helen and yeah, leave you to it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan.
My pleasure.
I'll just echo what Dan said, what he said, and say thank you ever so much for giving up your evening to come on a whistle-stop tour of our brand new small group tour, South Africa, Wildlife of Land and Sea. If you're free between the 26th of August and the 5th of September this year, you might want to consider joining us for what I think is an absolute humdinger of a trip. Dan has also done this trip, so he's very familiar with the area, so he will be able to answer questions throughout the chat. But without further ado, Wildlife of Land and Sea. Is there any other country in the world where it's possible to combine marine wildlife and terrestrial land wildlife watching with such ease? It is phenomenal. So these guys that you can see here, the southern right whales, very similar to their northern right whales counterparts, but genetically different. And they basically calf and birth and mate off the shores of the Western and Eastern Cape every year between June and November. So our starting point will be 4 nights in Hermanus, generally considered the best whale watching from land in the world. And we're going to start our adventure by flying direct with British Airways straight into Cape Town. So at 11:05 on the 29th of August, I will be chomping at the bit to get through customs, get through immigration. We will be met, we will be transferred 90 minutes away to Hermanus, the second red blob that has just appeared on your screen. We won't be going straight there, but I'm not going to give away too much too soon. So from Hermanus, we'll be spending 4 nights here. Our days will be spent whale watching by boat and also from shore before we hot-foot it back to Cape Town, and we take a 2.5 hour flight across to Hoedspruit, which is where I used to work in this area. So again, wonderful little part of the world. I have seen leopard at Hoedspruit Airport, so prepared for the unexpected. You never know what you might see. And we will then spend a further 4 nights in this area in Klaserie, which is a private reserve which is bordering the mighty Kruger National Park, and Timbavati, another vast private reserve, meaning we've got a large area in which we can traverse and look for the big five and other species. So 4 nights in Hermanus, 4 nights in Klaserie. We will then fly back to Johannesburg and from there get a connecting flight back to the UK. So it's short, it's sharp, it's easily done in a week's leave, and it is wonderful. It's a nice, easy trip. You don't need to be particularly fit. We're going to be staying in lovely, lovely accommodation. I'll show you some images of where we're going to be. So it's a very accessible trip for anybody, really. So starting off along with Sydney, my most favourite city in the whole wide world, the beautiful mother city that is Cape Town. So we will land there and we will head straight to Hermanus. So if you wanted to spend time in Cape Town, we could easily fly you out a couple of days earlier. I can waffle on about things to do in Cape Town for a long time. Obviously, top of the list is visiting the wine farms. They grow wine in the city itself as well as just outside. But yes, we're there for whale season. There's always wonderful birding at Rondevlei, at all sorts of different places. And there are so many attractions. I have spent months in this city, if you put all of the trips together. And I have still never been to Robben Island. I've never been to the castle. There's still an awful lot that I haven't seen. And I would thoroughly recommend 3, 4, 5 nights in Cape Town if you wanted to experience all that the place has to offer before then continuing on with the group trip. So this is taken from Lion's Head in Cape Town. You're looking towards Table Mountain. It's just from a slightly different angle, but it's there in the center of your screen, angling away to the left. The Atlantic side on your right-hand side here. We're looking down at Clifton here, which leads into Camps Bay, which leads into Llandudno, which leads into Hout Bay, which leads into Comachie and Missy Cliffs, and eventually you hit Cape Point with its nature reserves, its ostrich, its eland, its mountain zebra. You've then got the False Bay side with Simonstown and the penguins. You've got the Table Mountain itself. You've got the V&A waterfront, Blinking Neck. I could go on and on and on. I love it, but it's not part of our tour. So what we're going to be doing is on arrival at Cape Town, we shall be transported across to Hermanus. Now, it's a 90-minute drive to Hermanus, but why would you not visit Betty's Bay, or more accurately speaking, Stony Point penguin colony en route? If we have a chance to get out and see African penguins in their absolute gorgeousness, we are going to do it. So this is Betty's Bay or Stony Point, and they're there year round. Their numbers do thin out between sort of September and October when they're out at sea looking for food. But they are there. Some of them may be in molt already. But just look at this scenery. It's glorious. We've got the Overberg Mountains as our backdrop and the wonderful Indian and Atlantic Ocean, away from us. So we are going to have an opportunity to get onto a boardwalk. The penguins walk directly underneath that boardwalk, and they walk towards their burrows, which are in cliffs behind you, or you can look out to sea and just fill up on the absolute delight that is seeing these wonderful creatures in fairly close proximity. So it's a really lovely start to the trip. And then, of course, we'll wave goodbye. Sorry, I had to do that. You see what I did? That was dreadful. Moving on. I'm not a comedian. From there, although I make myself laugh, I don't know whether that counts. But from there, we will move on to Walker Bay itself. And this glorious image, once again, with those mountains as the backdrop, the rocky cliffs, and in those waters, there be whales. And this is how close they can come. They can come even closer than this. So this is why Hermanus is considered the best land-based whale watching in the world. You've got the southern right whales that are using the sandy coves and the calmer waters of Walker Bay for breeding and for mating purposes. On average, females will reproduce every 3 years or so, although recent studies seem to suggest that that's becoming every 5 or 6 years. The calf will be born here. It will be fattened up a little bit here on its mother's milk. The adult is unlikely to feed whilst here. And then towards November, December time, they start to head into the subantarctic waters where they fill up on copepods, which is a type of crustacean, and krill. So they are baleen whales. They actually have a very long baleen. It can be up to 9 foot, which is ridiculous. And it's black, which is quite unusual. Now, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to go to our rather lovely quarters at which we will be based for the next 4 days or 4 nights. So this glorious building that you can see hogging the front, there's no better word for it. You cannot beat the location. This is called the Marine Hermanus, and this is where we shall be at home throughout our stay. So you can walk down from the Marine down along to the cliff. There is a cliffside path that you can follow. You can see it on the left-hand side of your screen here. That continues over to the right-hand side of your screen. This property is a humdinger. It is the place to stay in Hermanus. It is beautifully appointed, very marine and very natural feel. When you have a coffee here, there will be a little biscuit next to your cup on the saucer, and it will be in the shape of a whale. I mean, how gorgeous. You can see the agapanthus just outside, my favorite flower, hands down, but this property is all about the views. So it maximizes bathrooms, bedrooms, all the communal areas. They are going to be looking out to sea. So you can actually do, as Dan's wife here is doing, from your bedroom, glued to your binoculars, looking out into the waters of Walker Bay, looking for signs of activity. I mean, how amazing is that? Glorious, absolutely glorious. So you can, after a long journey, just relax for the afternoon if you'd like. We should be here sort of mid to late afternoon on our second day. And if you want to just relax and get over your journey, feel free. But this is how close these coastal paths are. So in the afternoon, I will be encouraging you to get out and explore. Hermanus is very walkable. It's very safe. There's lovely restaurants, there are lovely bars, and there's some lovely curio shopping to be had as well. But obviously what we will be looking for predominantly will be signs of wildlife. Now, when you're looking out to sea, you're looking for blows. So southern right whales have a very, very distinct V-shaped blow. They lack a dorsal fin, which makes them quite distinct, because they're not the only whale to be found in these waters. And they also have huge callosities, lighter coloured patches all over their heads predominantly, and on other parts of their body. And they breach, particularly in the afternoons when it gets a bit choppier out there, but you can stick to the path, or you can walk onto the cliffs themselves and just perch with your binoculars, with your cameras, and this hopefully is what we're going to be treated to. Whilst you're looking out to sea, just make sure you're looking down as well. The first time I went, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a rock, and then I tripped over it, and this poor thing absolutely scarpered. There are hyrax or rock dassies that sun themselves on the paths and on the cliffs. Completely harmless, don't worry about them at all. They feed on plants. but they are ridiculously endearing. This is one of Danny's photographs, so Dan's wife again, so thank you. And ridiculously endearing and very, very cute, and you can just watch. And they're often, you know, you can get some quite nice shots of them with the blue waters of the bay behind. So it's a lovely, just, you know, thing to look out for. Whilst you're looking for the whales, also take note of the other wildlife that is around, from those dassies to Cape cormorants that will be nesting or lining the cliffs. There will be sunbirds. This is a southern double-collared, and their song is glorious. So you might come across Cape sugarbirds, an endemic with a much, much longer tail and a browny colour. They don't have the iridescence that these sunbirds have. But there will be wildlife all around us, but obviously this is really what is the pull for us going when we do. So again, the whales are here from June until November. Initially, you might get 50 to 100 moving into the bay earlier in the season. That can raise to a couple of hundred as you go later in the season. The southern right whale population is actually recovering. During the days of whaling, we cut it very, very fine. There were only a few breeding females left. We're talking around 40 or less. And now their population, and the South African population in particular, is known to be pretty good. Things are changing, obviously. Global warming is having an impact on our oceans, as we know. But in the afternoon, this is really what we'll be looking for, the breaching, which often happens in more choppier conditions, and the winds do get up. Average temperatures will be anywhere between sort of 15 and 20 down in the Cape at this time of year, but the wind can make a difference, so pack for warmth and layers. But obviously, when you've got that much blubber on you, the southern rights won't necessarily feel it like we do. In the mornings, the bay is much calmer. So for every morning that we are there, we will be going out on a boat. It's not a private boat for our group. We will be going on a boat, you know, with other people. But this catamaran, it is super sleek, it is super fast, very maneuverable, and most importantly, it's very stable. So if you're worried about sea legs, don't be worried too much. We'll go out in the mornings when traditionally it's calmer, and then if it does start to get choppy, you can spend your afternoons whale watching from the cliff. Now, if there is inclement weather, then it's got a spacious interior as well, and you're able to walk entirely around the deck, meaning that, and there's a viewing platform at the back and also at the front. So if we are lucky enough, there are all manner of species that we might come across. There's Commerson's dolphins, there's bottlenose dolphins, there's humpback dolphins. These are common. There's Commerson's, and as we head out into the bay, they love to ride the wake. So we may well come across that, or come across pelagic birds. And this obviously is what we are really looking for. So we want to try and get up close and personal. We are using a whale watching company that Mark Howardine used to work with and has done a lot with over the years. So they have a very strong ethical background. 50 meters is the norm in terms of how close the boat will go towards a whale, but they are naturally very inquisitive. So southern right whales lack the dorsal fin. We may also come across humpback whales. We may come across Brooder's whales that are actually there year round. So we've got three big baleen species that we might come across. Obviously, if they are inquisitive and they come closer, this is another one of Danny's shots, you can see the clarity of the water and also how close they can come. Now, what you'll notice there probably are the callosities, these huge patches of white, and they're actually particularly good as an ID tool. So since 1969, so for 54 years now, the researchers and whale watchers in this area have been keeping records, and they do aerial surveys, they do ID kitting now, and these callosity patches are particularly good in terms of identifying individuals. Now, they grow, weirdly enough, I was reading an article this afternoon, and they grow often where males would have human facial hair. So, you know, just above the lips, they often line the lips as well. And it's just really embossed skin. But what then gets this big white patch are cyamids, which basically is whale lice, and they get infestations of this whale lice. And that is what makes them so distinctive. So, you know, you can read all about it. When we go out on the boat, there's lots of information available about what callosities are, about how they act as a fingerprint, like you can see here, about the baleen. You can see how black it is in that photo on the top left there. You can, about their dietary habits. So no, they don't eat fish. It is krill, crustaceans, zooplankton, and that they're considered the most hairy. So of course they're mammals, and that's a key diagnostic of being a mammal, is you have hair. And you know, if you've ever been to the grey whales of Baja, when the calves come up to the boat to say hi, you can often see the hairs on their chin and their heads, and as they get older, they lessen, much like us in some respects. So just a few more pictures of, you know, just how close you can get and how impressive these creatures are. They have a massive mouth to enable them to filter feed effectively. Beautifully clear, glossy skin. The wonderful Overberg Mountains in the background, as you can see there. They are prone to breaching, they are prone to fluking, so they're a good whale to watch. They don't just lie there. So at the end of your very hard morning spent out on the water, you can head for lunch. There is a shack literally right next to where we get off the boat that has superb TripAdvisor reviews. Dan reckons he's had the best seafood curry of his life there. And lunches and dinners are not included here because Hermanus is fantastic for eating out. So it gives you free rein to go out and try the various spots. This is one of my favorite spots. Many a glass of wine I've had sitting here in the sunshine, you know, watching the whales offshore in the afternoons. The gulls are all around you, then walk back up the cliff, dodging the dassies. It really is a fabulous, fabulous part of the world. And of course, there's wine there. It just gets better. So wildlife and wine, my favorite things on the planet, pretty much, and sunshine. So yes, Hermanus is, I mean, it's only an hour and 20 minutes drive away from Franschhoek. So again, if you wanted to do an extension before joining us, we can easily take you from Cape Town up to the Cape Winelands and then take you back to Cape Town to join the trip. But we will go for lunch on one day to a local Hermanus vineyard. There are a number of wine farms. Hermanus has its own wine route now, following Paarl and Stellenbosch and the Cape, Constantia, etc. So we will go for lunch and a wine tasting, of course, after which I would urge supreme caution if you're walking the clifftop path back to the hotel. So yeah, I can't wait for this bit, but it's not over yet. That's only half of the trip. So I'm getting a bit excited. Sorry, I can hear it in my voice. So we've been in the Cape. We've been to Hermanus. We've had 4 nights there. We've had 3 boat trips. We've had 4 afternoons just walking the cliffs. We've had a bit of wine, let's face it. We then head back to Cape Town, and it's about a 2-hour, 2-hour-20 flight that will take us non-stop into the low veld. And then I just breathe a huge sigh of relief. I breathe in the dust and the dung and that wonderful Africa smell, and I feel like I'm at home. So we're flying straight into Hoedspruit. And Hoedspruit, as I say, I used to work from here. I used to do airport transfers, picking up clients, dropping off clients, and I have seen leopard at this airport on more than one occasion. It is surrounded by private game reserves. So as we fly in, I'm going to be urging you to keep your eyes peeled. It's right next to a massive military airport, but we just ignore that. We're not going anywhere near that. We will be picked up on arrival at the airport. We will be taken by a minibus. Around about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what we see along the way. Because as soon as we're out of that airport gate, we'll turn left, we'll go through a little boom gate as we enter the Klaserie Reserve. And at that point, anything can happen. Elephant-tastic, hyena-tastic. I've seen cheetah on that road. We are in the bush now. So all sorts of the European Cape is far behind us. We now want our eyes, our ears, our noses on full alert for whatever we might see. So there we are, Hoedspruit, just in Limpopo province, not far from Mpumalanga. And then, yes, we'll be, after our stay, we'll fly back to Joburg and home, but we're not there yet. First of all, after a bit of game viewing en route to our lovely lodge, which is called Baobab Ridge, this is it. So we will check in. Now, it will be late afternoon by the time we arrive. So I suspect there will be a cold drink, perhaps a beer. Time to move on to the beer. A swim in the pool if you wish. And obviously you can check into your rather lovely room, which will overlook the bush. There is a water hole at the lodge. And we will settle into our new surroundings, taking in the sights and the sounds. Beautiful. Might fancy a bath. Yes, I just might. But we'll probably have a sundowner. This used to be my view every evening, looking out west towards the Drakensberg Mountains, the Ukashlamba, which is the Zulu word for the barrier of spears, which is what the Drakensberg translates as in Zulu. And the sun will set behind those mountains, the crickets, the cicadas, the hippos will start to make a noise. You might hear the lions roaring, the hyenas whooping, the jackals sounding like someone's being strangled. And it is utterly marvelous. So we will just relax into bed that evening and just soak up all the sounds of everything outside. Bright and early, we'll be up early, 5 o'clock, maybe earlier. We'll be heading out on drive. Early mornings, you all know, the best time to try and come across the predators that have had a busy night, prowling, marking territory, looking for food. In this part of the world, hyenas are accounting for the food they eat, 50% kill, 50% scavenge. So these guys are always active. I've had some of the best scent marking hyena sightings of my life in this area that we're going to. And just being able to watch them with their wonderfully curious social structure and being able to watch them just move over a blade of grass and seeing the deposit secretions and then the sniffing and the communicating and the noise. Oh my God, I love these creatures. They are phenomenal. So yeah, and if we were lucky enough to come across a den, even better. So love them. So early mornings, brilliant time for hyenas, brilliant time for predators in general, for your nocturnals. So these waterbuck have clocked that leopard that you can see coming down the bank with that telltale white tip to its tail. Waterbuck, they're one of my favorite. I say this about every antelope, but I love them. The males are magnificent. They have that wonderful musky smell, which possibly it's a secretion from the skin. There are various theories about it. There are theories that suggest that perhaps the smell is a water repellent. They are water buck. They are hugely dependent on water. They're usually within a 5-kilometer distance of water, more often than not within 2 Ks. So whenever you get towards any water area, you may well find leopard and lion waiting for them. So there's a fallacy that predators will not touch waterbuck because of their smell and because the meat supposedly doesn't taste good. Absolute tripe. I've seen lions on waterbuck kills on more than one occasion, and I just love this shot. I mean, that leopard is being spotted, or they know he's there. Maybe they can smell him, maybe they can't see him, but what a shot. I would love to be in a vehicle looking at that scene and just watching how it plays out. So early mornings, once it gets a bit warm, you know, this is what we're going to be going out in, 3 rows of 3 for our group. And, you know, he might have been out, he looks a bit skinny there. He looks like he could do with a feed. So, you know, before it gets too hot and they just flop under a tree, then they move from one tree to the next tree to the next tree and all their mighty fabulousness. Don't get me going on lions. We haven't got all night. But yeah, open vehicles. And the idea again, obviously, is that we will get as close as we can whilst respecting the space of the animal that we're watching. So mornings always make me think of dwarf mongoose. I love dwarf mongoose. Of course I do. Anything to do with Africa, pretty much. But dwarf mongoose fascinate me, and I love the morning light just as it comes up and it hits these old abandoned termite mounds that you can see here. So these are Macrotermes natalensis. They build the tall, fairy towers. They are fascinating creatures. And I mean, I will quite happily go and stick a twig down one of the opening turrets and then just pull it up and show you all the termites and talk to you about how many eggs the queen can lay in a day and this, that, and the other. But the dwarf mongoose are just wonderful to watch. They're noisy, they bicker, and full of character. And what you'll often find with dwarf mongoose will be southern yellow-billed hornbills, or zazu, or the flying banana, whatever you've heard it referred to when you've been out to Africa. And they have a nice relationship, a symbiosis between them, in that the hornbills will, the mongoose basically are going through leaf litter and they're looking for grubs and scorpions and reptiles. And any that they leave behind, as they're all moving through the undergrowth, the hornbills will come down and nick. So the hornbills, on the other hand, will produce a warning system. If there is an aerial attack, for example, a raptor hovering, the hornbill will call, the mongoose will stop dead still, and then they will all move back towards the termite mound if necessary, or they will just remain frozen. But it's wonderful to watch. And because they're so small, they need to warm up in the sun every morning before they get going, a little bit like meerkats. So they're very entertaining and very vocal, which I love. So this is, to me, what all the mornings are about. It's about the light. You know, cheetahs are just getting going in the morning. So again, you often find them on termite mounds. There is the heat generated if it is a termite mound that is in use. So they can be a place that, you know, a little bit warmer for these animals to sleep against, but also the height advantage that they give to cheetah, because if there are a lot of lion, if there's a lot of spotted hyena activity in the area, then cheetahs are very, very vulnerable. That glorious light when the sun has properly risen, and you know, we might be moving back towards the lodge after tea and coffee in the bush, and then you happen to come across this gorgeousness. Love them. And really, this is my favorite time to be in the bush. Spring in the bush is magnificent, much like spring here, just that time of rebirth. You know, they haven't had rain since April. We're now going to be here in September. The rains will be coming in October, November time. The flowers are beginning to come out. These are marula trees, Combretum imberbe. And this is the very famous tree from which the fruit is produced, that we get amarula, the cream liqueur. But the fruit is so important for kudu, for bushbuck, for baboons, for elephants, who will shake these trees. They will basically headbutt, and it's a solid trunk, these marula trees, and they will shake them in order to get the fruit to come down. Now, we'll be there too early for the fruit, but we will get the flowers that precede that. And the mighty, you know, the tall, these marula trees tower over everything else. They've got various uses, and they're just wonderful sort of sentries, vegetative sentries, if that is an expression. Beautiful, twisted. You'll get tree squirrels, you'll get owls, pearl-spotted owlets, African bard, all sorts, you know, sort of using these particular trees. And I love marulas, and I love the spring when everything is in flower, from Acacia nigrescens and knobthorn, with that beautiful creamy coloured long flower that is favoured by giraffe, by so many animals. And aligning the roads, you're going to have wild dugger with their bright orange flowers. You're going to have Livingston's commelina, like you've got here. You're going to have ruby nidias. There's, you know, there's going to be a lot of flowers and African violets that are out at this time, or bush violets. So there's so much to see, and it is a time of rebirth, and there will be the sounds that you hear. If we're early enough to get some of the migrants, you will get the quintessential sound of the African summer, which for me is a woodland kingfisher. From 4 a.m. until 7 p.m. And so it continues. You get this wonderful bird, used to be called the grey lory, renamed the grey go-away bird, which is supremely apt. You will hear this all day, every day. So it's basically saying, go away, go away. And it's a wonderful sound. I know I'm home when I hear that, and also when I hear the hoopoo. And one of my favourite sounds as well, a green wood hoopoo, stunningly beautiful bird. It's a tree nester, and what they do is they actually poop, they defecate all over the tree to deter predators. So they're actually a pretty filthy bird, but to me they're one of the most beautiful. And when they fly, they've got wonderful yellow coloration, yellow white on the wing, a little bit like a common scimitarbill, but much more colourful. And when the sun hits them, you can see that iridescence that is just, oh, it's stunning. And they call these mafazi birds, which for me I think is very, very apt, because you often get them in groups, and mafazi is the local Shangaan name for women. And it's because when they are together, they don't stop chattering. It's literally, but in a green wood hoopoo kind of way. So I just, again, just these things just make me smile, and I love them. And we're going to be waking up, you know, and we're going to be going back to the lodge, and we're going to be vervets everywhere. So they have colour vision. Fruit is a huge part of their diet, so they need to be able to tell when it's ripe and when it's not. And they will, you know, when you're having your brekkie, you just got to watch your melon. They will nick down, and they will nick your strawberry and nick your melon, and, you know, nick your bananas. They're cheeky, but they're, again, just a wonderful creature to sit and watch and to listen. They have a number, like a ridiculously high number of recognized calls. They have at least 6 or 8 different alarm calls, and each alarm signifies a different kind of predator. They have sentries up in the trees, and if that sentry just disappears, the whole troop disappears. There's never a vocal that goes with it, but fascinating to watch. Real cheeky monkeys. And in between drives, we will have time back at the lodge. So obviously lunch will be served during that time. We're on a full board basis, and common to the area that I'm walking right through the lodge. This again is one of my favorite antelope. These are Nyala, and their distribution really is quite limited. It's in the southeastern parts of South Africa, and slightly north. And if you look at the way in which this male is standing, it's quite odd. He's lifting his stomach up, and he's really arching his back. Now, quite clearly, this is, you know, I mean, from the size of his horns, from the white tip at the end of his horns, to the coloration, this is a mature bull. The younger males look very much like the females. They are the same tan color as the bottom of his leggings here, with the white stripes. So they're like a larger bushbuck. But then a few years into life, they start to develop this very shaggy, much darker coloration, which is hugely impressive. They are a stunning, stunning animal. So disrupting the outline, you can see the white lines coming down his coat and the spots on his hind leg. And the males, very, very interestingly, when they are establishing dominance, rather than just going straight into a brawl so that it's brawn that wins, what these guys do is they have a stamina display. And the only way I can describe it is like watching a dance, but it is hypnotic. And you watch it and you're pulled into it, and it goes on and on and on. And it starts like this. They stand, two males will stand next to each other, and the stomach will be raised up like it's doing there. The head will go down and the back will arch, as you can see there. And then the two males will move so that they are head to head with their heads going down, their horns forward, as if to say, look what I've got here. And this just increase in size by lifting the back. They raise the hair on their mane, their tails go up, everything is raised, and it's to make themselves look much bigger to their opponent. Now, if one of them doesn't back down with all of this hair raising and making themselves much larger, what will then happen is, rather than being head to head with their heads down, one male will move next to the other so that they're head to tail. And when they're head to tail, they will ever so slowly start to move, and they will move identically together, and they will lift their feet. The heads remain down, always looking at each other out of the corner of their eye, and they lift their feet, and they will lift one foot up, and very deliberately they will put it down. They'll lift the next one up, and they'll very deliberately put it down. And it's like it's in slow motion, and they will move round and round and round, head to tail, basically mirroring each other. And it is fabulous. And this literally goes on for hour after hour after hour. I remember having an afternoon off once, and I sneakily went and sat at the lodge rather than at my quarters, simply because we had elephants just on the other side of the river. And I actually stopped watching the elephants and just watched the Nyala bulls that were on the lawn. And I watched them for, I reckon, the whole time that the game drives were out, so 3 hours, and then I had to scarper when the game drives came back. But only if none of them back down after these hours of mirroring each other. And if you consider the concentration that is required for them to do this, if neither animal breaks down, that's when they will fight, and then it becomes about brawn. So it's literally brute force at that point. And I've only seen that, I think, maybe once. And I mean, they're the same family as kudu. If you've ever seen kudu males fight, they don't hold back. You know, it's quite something. So really, crikey, I've banged on about Nyalas for many minutes now, but they're wonderful. And this is the sort of thing when you're sitting back at the lodge in between drives, listen for the monkeys, listen for the birds, have a look at the Nyala, the antelope coming through. Because there is a water hole at the lodge, then no reason why you might not see elephants coming down. You'll almost certainly probably see warthogs coming in and out, and other, you know, sort of wildebeest. You know, you just don't know. So always have your cameras and your binoculars handy, because there is so much to see. Then we'll go out again in the afternoons, and after sundowners in the bush, of course, watching the sun go down behind the Drakensberg Mountains, then we have a chance to try and come across the nocturnal creatures. Obviously, for a lot of people, leopard, lion, hyena will be top of that list, potentially even aardvark, pangolin, you never say never. But these guys are very common, so we'll hopefully see things like porcupine and civets. I love civets. Again, I've never actually been able to get a photograph of a civet because they move so quickly, but they just look like a cartoon robber, you know, with that band that they have across. And they can eat incredible things, you know. They use the same loo spot. They use a midden like rhinos. and it's called a civet tree rather than a labbit tree, which I quite like. And a civet tree is often, if you're on a bushwalk walking through the bush and you seem to come across an area that has got hundreds of millipede exoskeletons just scattered in a pile, then chances are you've come across a civet tree. So millipedes, they're herbivores, and they have a number of different ways in which they escape predation. They curl up very, very tightly. If you've ever picked one up, they immediately just curl up into a ball with their legs on the underside. So that hard exoskeleton is outside. But what they also do is they squirt cyanide at predators. And yet a civet can just eat however many in one go, no issue whatsoever. So they are fabulous little creatures. We might come across bush babies. They have the wonderful habit of urinating on their hands and feet, and then when they jump from tree to tree to tree, they take their scent with them, which I think is rather marvellous. We might see them around the lodge. You know, bush babies are fabulously endearing. This is a lesser bush baby. If you've ever heard the greater bush baby, crikey, if you've heard it crying, it sounds like a baby. So it's quite disconcerting. You wake up in the middle of the night and there's a crying baby right outside your window. Sorry, thick-tailed bush baby. I don't know where I got greater from. I know what I mean. But these are all the things that we'll be looking out for. And on the night drive, you know, you'll get home, we'll have dinner under the stars, we'll listen to the hippos, and we'll listen to the jackals and the hyenas, and it all starts again. So we've got 4 wonderful nights of this. And in between our game drives, we will then also have the opportunity to go out on bushwalks. And I love bushwalks, particularly in the spring, because the insects are back and they're doing all sorts. You know, you can turn over the leaf of an apple leaf, which is one of my favourite trees. It has a huge taproot that always shows you where water is. And it's a very pretty tree. And often if you just lift up the leaves, you can see underneath loads of moth eggs, just tiny, teeny pinpricks, but all over. This is something I used to spend a lot of time doing as a kid. Yeah, I was very shy as a child, so it was all about my dogs and about playing around with insects. And this, you may well have come across these elsewhere in Africa, but all these little conical, inverted conical holes that you can see here are made by ant lions, one of the small 5. Now, an adult ant lion only lives for about 24 to 48 hours. It basically does the business it needs to do, procreates, and then it dies. But its larvae is what creates these little holes, and the larvae can live for about 16 months. And it has a blind intestine, by which I mean it can't poop. So the larvae basically scoots backwards into the soil to create this cone, and then it digs into the sand, and it looks kind of like a woodlouse sort of thing, or an earwig, and then it's got these 2 pincers coming out of the top of its head. And what it does is, when an ant falls into this conical pit, it struggles to get out, and as it, in its panic to get out, it dislodges the sand, which alerts the antlion larvae that it's got some prey. So what happens is the antlion larvae that is sitting at the bottom of this hole pincers up. It literally rushes forward, throws sand granules onto its prey, and then it sticks these pincers into the ant, sucks all the body fluids out, and then goes back down into its hole again. And for 16 months it does that with nowhere for all of these body fluids to go. So that's how it's growing through its larval process, and then it emerges. 24, 48 hours later, it's gone. That's the life of an antlion. Fascinating, isn't it? We might come across processionary moths or processionary worms. These are bag nest moth worms, and we would sometimes wake up in the morning and go to walk out across the veranda to head out to the game viewers so that we could, you know, get down to the lodge for the morning drive. And you would have to step over meters and meters and meters of processionary worms. And then they would go all up trees, and you'd see them wrapped, you know, in a beautiful pattern all the way around the trees. I mean, the bush is just fascinating. Obviously, we're going there to look for the big 5. You know, we're looking for, you know, the big stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of birding. I like the birds. But there's an awful lot. Essentially, I think what I'm trying to say here is there's much, much more besides. So, you know, the bush doesn't always play along. We see what we see. Mother Nature decides that. If we're lucky, we will get a lot of the big stuff, but we will undoubtedly also spend a lot of time, particularly because I'm a nerd, talking about the little stuff like this. So really 4 days is not enough, but this is a taster. Yeah, this is a brilliant, brilliant trip that we're doing here. So 4 nights in Hermanus, 4 nights in Klaserie at Baobab Ridge. We've got the best of both worlds. We've got marine wildlife, we've got terrestrial wildlife, and it's just going to be amazing. So if you're free, 28th of August to the 5th of September, please do come and join me. Sometimes I shut up, I promise you. But if, you know, we do a number of other small group trips as well, quite a few of which we've just literally launched. So this is one trip that we have launched. For the last couple of years, we have offered our South Africa's Rare Mammals in Style, which is another trip that I operate. That I have the fortune to lead. And this is beautiful. We're going to the green Kalahari. Think of red, red, red dunes that just go on as far as the eye can see. And we go in winter so that the nocturnal creatures, the rare mammals, aardvark, pangolin, aardwolf, brown hyena, what we're looking for will hopefully come out and forage, you know, earlier rather than when it gets very, very cold overnight here, because we're in the heart of the South African winter at this time. Epic, epic trip. If you're into photography, this needs to be on your radar. Traveling with Sean Weekly, who is leading more and more photographic trips for us. Normally we operate this trip in June and July. Next year we do have a departure in May as well. And it's going to KwaZulu-Natal, which to me, if you wanted to see South Africa in one province, mountains, ocean, bush, this is it. I love KwaZulu-Natal. And we're going right up just below the Eswatini or Swaziland border here to a wonderful lodge called the Manga on a private reserve, and it's wildlife and night sky photography. So amazing trip if you're big into your wildlife photography. If you can go in August, then we have our Spring Flowers Cape to the Kalahari trip, starting in Cape Town, have a few days exploring the Cape itself, before starting to head north into the beautiful Cederberg Mountains, and then the dot on the map that you can see there, which is Namaqualand. And in August, September, this area comes alive with wildflowers. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We then continue further north still through Ogrubby Falls, and then finally up into the Transfrontier Kalahari Park, which is bordering Botswana and Namibia. Epic trip, absolutely. It's another one. They're all brilliant. If September is a better time for you to travel, as we're moving into spring, so it's not quite so chilly in parts of South Africa, then we've got our Kalahari Conservation Experience, which is another trip that I am fortunate enough to run. And this is a week-long stay, and this is a chance to get your hands dirty, to get stuck in. So whether it's applying herbicides, whether it is performing predator counts or springbok counts. There is an alarming fall in the number of springbok, and nobody really knows why. Their numbers are just plummeting. So if you want a more hands-on experience where you're actively getting involved in reserve management, then this trip is for you. It's an absolute winner. But obviously, on top of that, we've launched another new trip going again into the spring even further in October. And this is to a wonderful private game reserve called Karika, which is on the Eastern Cape, only about 10 k's away from Kenton-on-Sea, which is a spectacular coastline. And this is Rare Mammals of the Eastern Cape. This is led by Neil Aldridge. We do a number of trips with him. He's just led a Borneo trip with Nick Garbett. He does quite a few Botswana trips for us. Sorry, Dan, I'm obviously got to shut up. So Karika is gorgeous. I love the Eastern Cape. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But on top of that, there's loads of bits we've not even talked about. We haven't talked about, Northern Kruger. We haven't talked about other areas of KwaZulu-Natal. We've not talked about Karoo, which is brilliant for rare mammals. I mean, blinking it, I could go on and on and on and on and on. We can do tailor-made. If you want to self-drive, just give me a call. I'll bang on about it all day. So yes, there's a lot we can do. Any questions? Oh, you're muted. Oh, look at that. I can't hear my boss.
Oh, you don't get too used to it. I'm back now. Helen, that was wonderful. Really, really wonderful. It's always such a pleasure to listen to you on these talks. And particularly,
I just want to go back.
Somewhere like South Africa as well. You're just in your element. So lots of wonderful questions coming in, lots of wonderful comments as well. So before we get on to those, I'm just going to launch the poll, which is, as mentioned earlier, an opportunity just to request any of those travel plans for the trips which Helen has just talked about there. So that should be on your screen now. But as you can imagine, Helen, we have got a few questions for you. I
can't believe I'm so sorry. I've done it again. It's almost an hour.
You haven't at all. No, you're bang on time, roughly. I've managed to answer quite a few of the questions as we've gone along. I was lucky enough to do a very similar trip to this last year, early September as well. So we've timed it exactly the same because I had such a wonderful time. That was for my 40th birthday. And Hermanus really is, it's such a special place. Interestingly, one of the guests attending tonight has asked, like, how frequently do you see the whales out of Hermanus? And the honest truth is that they're just there the whole time, aren't they? When you're out on the boats, you catch up with them pretty quickly, and they show very well. You're often 50 meters, 100 meters away, and they will come closer. So it's wonderful kind of viewing, and you see the interaction between the mothers and the calves. And then coming back ashore in the afternoon, the wind does quite often pick up a little bit in the afternoon, just creates a bit more chop, but that seems to excite the whales, and you get that, that wonderful breaching activity. So it's a brilliant combination of the two. So I've kind of answered the question for you there. Forgive me. I don't know. You feel the same because we've talked about this.
I'm sure they're sick of the sound of my voice. So carry on, Dan.
The special thing about Hermanus is the fact that if you are unfortunate and you have some bad weather and you can't go out on the boat, then you've got equally fantastic opportunities to view them from the shore. We've got a good amount of time there, so should we have some bad weather and can't get out on a boat, we can just roll those boat trips back, and we've got 4 boat trips to take over the 4 days, so we can do them. They're offered through the morning, in the afternoon, and early evening as well. So there's lots of slots available. But yeah, it's a really wonderful place. I know you love it a lot as well, which is obviously where you're leading. Yeah, it's very special. I will get on to a question which you can actually answer, Helen, rather than me just answering for you.
Okay.
And that is, this is an interesting one. An anonymous person has asked, if you're not an early riser, are you going to miss the best parts of the trip? And I think, kind of answering honestly, you probably
certainly in
will.
The bush.
Yeah.
Certainly in the bush. I mean, in Hermanus, because you have the option to whale watch from land. It's your holiday. If you don't want to get up, don't get up. That's it. It's basically, that's your call. But certainly for the latter part of the trip where you're in the bush, I would be very much encouraging you to join us on the morning game drive. Just stopping for tea and coffee and just watching the light change, and it's just magical. You want to be awake as often as you possibly can when you're in the bush. Whereas in Hermanus, if you wanted to get up at 10 o'clock, you're still going to get a good 7 hours of whale watching in.
That's true. We could always actually book later whale watching trips for you. It wouldn't be with the group necessarily, but we could easily arrange for you to get down there, and you could go out on the midday one or the afternoon one. And crucially, I think when you're in the bush, it is an early start, but you've then got a good amount of time in the middle of the day, haven't you? When you have, a bit of a siesta, you can relax, read a book and stuff, and have a sleep if you want to, if you want to catch up on that sleep. And generally in the bush, they're not late nights, are they? Let's face it.
Nowhere in the world is a late night for me, because I'm not square.
It's
So yeah, you're in bed by 9:30 pretty much.
You are.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right.
because it's a long day and it's fresh air and you're outside all day. So yeah.
This is really designed to be quite a soft trip, and just to offer not only some fantastic kind of wildlife watching, but also just an opportunity to relax and unwind and do some of that kind of normal stuff which people do on holidays. It's not like a dedicated rare mammals trip to Borneo where we're out every night, that type of thing. It's a proper kind of relaxing wildlife holiday. So no, I want to come back. if you don't fill your group, I'll be joining you. That's for sure. I'm sure Danny will come as well.
Hey, no,
what else?
Sure.
Chris Bennett has just asked, can we do it as a tailor-made trip if they can't make the group trip?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, as I say, we can very easily organise transfers from Cape Town to Hermanus and back if you don't want to self-drive. If you do want to self-drive, it gives you even more flexibility because we can build in a route that will take in, the north coast, I love north of Cape Town, that is very, Aesopentane up to Paternoster, that you can see the whales up that side as well. And that tends to often be overlooked. I think Hermanus is without doubt the place to go, but Aesopentane is there. So yeah, we can build in whatever you want to see, really. So yes, tailor-made, definitely.
Yeah, you've done a lot of tailor-made South Africa, haven't you? It's kind of one of your areas of expertise. And the other thing there is crucially that, if there's another reserve that you want to combine it with, we can easily do that. There's so many options out there. So yeah, if that is of interest, absolutely just get on the phone and we'll sort that out for you. We had a question about the weather, just the temperatures in the morning out on the bush. Is it super chilly? Is it a little bit chilly? What do they do to help you keep warm?
At that time of year, I wouldn't have thought you'd need hot water bottles. We used to use those in June, July, but then, the bush does start to warm up. I mean, I will be taking layers, but I feel the cold. So my thermals go everywhere. I'm really painting a good picture of myself here, aren't I? Right. So, but when I landed in Joburg at the end of August last year, it was 29 degrees. And that's still winter, or the tail end of winter. So when you get up to the bush, you're probably looking anywhere, 25 to 30 degrees at that time of year and during the day. But it can feel windy on an open vehicle. So if the air is cool, I will be packing a fleece and a windproof, definitely.
No, that's good advice.
Mm.
No, super. It's I think we're almost there with the questions, Helen. I have managed to get on top of quite a few of them. Somebody has just one final question. Is just asked about the UV levels. Are we going to need factor 50 and so forth? It doesn't hurt, does it? I mean, why not? If you're out on the water, you're more exposed anyway. If you're sitting on a vehicle and I think the vehicles do. I can't remember if they have a cover or not, but either way, you're still going to.
I always 50. Yeah, always.
Sun hat and 50 is the way forward, really. But I'm sure most of you guys know this already. But no, I think we're pretty much there, Helen. If any more come in, then we will be sure to respond tomorrow.
You can always email. I'm just trying to move on to the next slide for you, Dan, but because we've been talking on this one for quite a while, there is a delay. There we are. There's the last slide for you. How many hints? I think we're almost there.
Fabulous. No, well, obviously, we will be in touch tomorrow with any travel plans that you've requested. There is a special offer associated with this trip of £100 discount. And then we've got talks next week and the week after as well, both with Nick Garbett, firstly to Yellowstone and then to Tanzania. So they should be two fantastic talks as well. But thank you so much for tonight, Helen. You're brilliant as ever. I always say this, but you're
excited.
Absolutely remarkable speaker, and we're lucky to have you. And thank you to everybody for joining in tonight. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.